David Harbour played Police Chief Jim Hopper in Stranger Things and spent a good chunk of his career trying to stop a serious Russian threat. Now he'll be in the Black Widow movie as Alexei Shostakov, a man who stands as a champion of the Soviet Union. Talk about a role reversal. But something about his costume looks familiar, and it's not just because we're still mourning Captain America's youth. These two characters may be on opposing sides, but they have a surprising amount in common with one another. Let's take a look at some ways in which the Red Guardian and Captain America are seriously similar. One of the many great things about Marvel Comics is that they've always allowed real-world events to seep into their fictional universe. Captain America made his debut in 1941 during World War II, and he was pretty much designed to punch America's enemies right in the face. Needless to say, this helped him become an incredibly popular character, since he capitalized on everyone's sense of patriotism, and our desire to punch enemies in the face if we're being honest. Alexei Shostakov is also a product of his time, having made his comic book debut in the Avengers number 43 back in 1966. This was during the Cold War when Americans were anxious about the threat posed by the Soviet Union, so basically just being a Russian character was a knock against Alexei even before he became a symbol of the Soviet Union. Even though Captain America and the Red Guardian were created decades apart, World War II is an important part of both of their backstories. Steve Rogers was a soldier during this time, but Alexei experienced the fighting when he was just a child. A world war might not be a very cheerful thing to have in common, but it's just one of the many things that make these two such interesting opposites. Everyone knows that Captain America was a soldier. The source of his powers is even the super soldier serum, which turned him into, well, I'll let you figure that one out. Alexei Shostakov might not have been a super soldier, but he was definitely a regular one. Actually, he was better than the average soldier, and definitely superior to Steve before he received the serum. Alexei lost his mother during World War II, which led to him being adopted by Soviet officer Vasily Karpov, a man who both respected and feared Captain America. Needless to say, this had an influence on his parenting, and he raised Alexei to become a soldier, which he eventually did. In fact, he was one of the Soviet Union's most celebrated pilots, which is a stark contrast to Steve Rogers, who crashed his dumb plane into the ocean. Just kidding, I know it was a heroic sacrifice, or at least an attempted one. Steve Rogers also had a strong desire to become a soldier, but was rejected at first. After getting involved in Operation Rebirth, he then became a celebrated soldier. I'm not saying the Red Guardian's a better character, but at the very least he was the better fighter before Steve got some medical assistance in that regard. But both of these men know what it's like to be a soldier, and it's been an important part of reshaping their personalities and outlooks on life. Every warrior needs some kind of weapon, and for Steve Rogers, come on, you know, it's a shield. That big, round, super durable shield which represents the old red, white, and blue. The fact that Captain America uses a shield represents his role as a defender instead of an aggressor, even though he can do some serious damage by slinging that bad boy around. Some villains like the Taskmaster use a sword and shield, but Cap stands out by relying mostly on this iconic and multifunctional object. The Red Guardian actually has a really similar device that he uses in battle. It's a wearable disc which he keeps clipped to his belt when he's not throwing it around. Like Steve Rogers, he has impeccable aim, and his disc is designed to return easily to his hand. Thanks to some strategically placed magnets, it comes back to him after he throws it. Since these two are soldiers, they naturally have experience with a lot of different weapons, but their signature items are very close to one another. Marvel Studios manages to do a lot of things very well, which has helped set their films apart from other less than spectacular superhero flicks. Let's take a moment to acknowledge the fact that they managed to take notoriously goofy-looking comic book costumes and give them big screen upgrades that don't look completely ridiculous. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Jared Leto. At least put a shirt on under that purple trench coat. I think it's gonna be a pain to dry clean. Anyway, not only do Captain America and the Red Guardian manage not to look absurd on the big screen despite their skin-tight outfits and helmets, but their costumes are a lot alike in terms of both form and function. Their helmets both go over their eyes and feature a symbol of their identities right over their foreheads. Both suits have a big star on the chest, but of course the Red Guardian's just has to be a little bit bigger. Come on, it's not the size of your star that matters, it's how brightly it shines. Both designs also feature a utility belt with plenty of pockets to make sure our heroes have everything they need within arm's reach. And since you can't stick CBR in your utility pouch, you'll need to hit that subscribe button to access all of our latest and greatest content. Work around that YouTube algorithm by remembering to turn on your notifications, either right here or in the settings menu if you're on mobile. Now let's get back to this Marvel matchup. Both Captain America and the Red Guardian have experience going solo, but they've also worked as part of a team. The leadership skills section on Steve Rogers' resume is a mile long. Even in the MCU alone, we've seen him take charge of the Avengers and his post-Civil War team of technically illegal superheroes. In the comics, he has even more experience in this regard. He founded the Avengers Unity Division, which sought to unify humans and mutants. Then he led the Invaders, a team started with Bucky Barnes, the Human Torch, Toro, and Namor the Submariner. Talk about a team I'd love to see in the MCU. There's also the Secret Avengers, the Captain America Corps, and many more. One of Steve's many skills is being a brilliant tactician and strategist. So it makes sense that he's taken on this role so many times over the years and that he functions well in a group setting. As for the Red Guardian, he doesn't have quite as many affiliations, but he's worked with others before and not just in the Army or the KGB. He's been part of Kang the Conqueror's Legion of the Unliving, and during his time as Ronin, he was a member of the Dark Ocean Society. Both of these characters have a history of working well with others, and with Natasha Romanoff specifically. In the MCU, these two developed a mutual respect for one another that blossomed into a deep friendship. Natasha stood by Steve's side following Captain America's Civil War, and it's clear the two of them got really close. But this might be one area where the Red Guardian is actually superior, since he was married to Natasha at one point in time. In the comics, Alexei was a celebrated soldier, so it only made sense that he had a high-profile partner. He married the then-famous ballerina Natasha Romanova before he was recruited as a special operative. Of course, him being recruited by the KGB unbeknownst to his wife really put a damper on their marriage, especially since she thought he had perished. Saying that these two had changed when they were reunited is a huge understatement. But despite all of that, it was clear that they still had affection for each other. But in the aftermath of the supposed loss of her husband, Natasha wanted to honor his memory, which is just what the KGB wanted, so they could manipulate her into joining the Black Widow program. In fact, this is another thing that Steve and Alexei have in common. When Alexei was recruited to become the Red Guardian, he was told to forget all about his former life and forbidden to contact anyone from his past, including Natasha. So naturally, everyone assumed the worst, and the KGB spread a story that Alexei had perished while testing out an experimental new rocket. That's the kind of thing that sounds messy, so it's no wonder nobody was looking for a body afterward. As for Steve Rogers, people have thought he was gone too. Of course, there was his famous plunge into the ocean, which resulted in him being frozen in ice. Although he was technically still alive, everyone assumed he had perished in the crash, which seemed like a pretty safe bet at the time. There was also the incident in which a mind-controlled Sharon Carter appeared to mortally wound him. His body was buried, vows to avenge him were made, and it all seemed pretty official that he was gone. Of course, later it turned out that the essence of Steve still existed, and he was able to come back. Hey, it's a comic book. People do that all the time. Some people strike out as freelance heroes or villains, but the Red Guardian and Captain America were both sponsored by their respective governments. Steve Rogers was chosen for the US government's Project Rebirth, which sought to create a race of super soldiers to give them an edge in World War II and beyond. Naturally, he's an incredible warrior, but his value is so much more than that. He stands out as an icon of his home country, and he's a symbol just as much as he is a hero. In the MCU, Steve learns that his role as a government-sponsored hero is more than just fighting bad guys. It's encouraging the troops, inspiring civilians, and making informative PSAs for high school kids. The Red Guardian was designed to be the Soviet Union's answer to Captain America, as you might have noticed based on their super similar costumes. He was already a hero of the Soviet Union because of his time as a soldier, but as the Red Guardian, he became a symbol of the Soviet Union. Even though both of these characters were designed to be used by their governments, that doesn't mean they've always played by the rules. In the MCU, we saw Captain America stand against the Sokovia Accords during Civil War. Even though it took him from being a hero to being technically a criminal, he stood up for what he believed in, even though it meant going against the government. He's done this more than once in the comic books when his values take precedence over his orders, like when he realized the government had covered up their involvement with the leader of the Secret Empire, causing Cap to become disillusioned. He no longer wanted to be called Captain America, so he took on the identity of Nomad and went rogue. In the comics, the KGB worked with the People's Republic of China to utilize a weapon called the Psychotron, which would induce mass hallucinations. The Red Guardian was supposed to get the device close enough to its victims, but a handful of Avengers were sent to stop him. Even though the heroes defeated him fair and square, the Red Guardian ultimately disobeyed orders by protecting Captain America and Black Widow. When most people think of Captain America, we think of Steve Rogers. Well, for now. Since Sam Wilson is taking over the role in the MCU, he might be the first one that comes to mind someday. He's also taken on the mantle in the comic books, and so is Steve's BFF, Bucky Barnes. The mantle of Captain America is a symbol, and it's important that someone goes by the title, even if it's not the original Steve Rogers. And the same can be said for the Red Guardian. While Alexei is the version we'll be seeing in the Black Widow movie, he's not the only person who has been known by this title. He wasn't even the first. That honor goes to Alexei Lebedev, who supposedly perished in a Soviet purge, resulting in the title being passed on. When it seemed like Alexei had perished, Tanya Belinskaya took on the name Red Guardian in his absence. Then there's Joseph Petkus, who later became the Steel Guardian, and Krasno Granitsky, who succeeded him. And these are just a few of the people who have been known as Captain America and the Red Guardian over the years. But being a hero isn't just having a flashy costume and an iconic moniker. Everyone knows Steve Rogers has some sweet fighting moves, but his character is even more than just a powerful warrior. Part of what makes him so special is his unflinching dedication to his values. He lives his life by a rigid moral code and believes in doing what's right, no matter what. In the MCU, we've seen this put him at odds with characters like Tony Stark, who have a moral code that's more, let's say, open to interpretation. Even when he rebelled against the Sokovia Accords, he did so because that was what he truly believed in, and whether or not it was legal didn't enter into his equation. When Alexei became the Red Guardian, he had to undergo a brutal training regimen. He emerged from it stronger, but also became a meaner and more ruthless individual. Hey, in his line of work, those are pretty much prerequisites. But despite this, he still couldn't shake his feelings of what was right. During his mission with the Psychotron, the head of the Red Chinese military base, Colonel Ling, attempted to take out Captain America. He had dominated the battle with the Red Guardian, who was outraged when Ling stepped in to render his opponent unconscious. When he attempted to deliver a final blow, Alexei actually stopped him, believing that it was morally wrong to destroy a helpless opponent who had bested him fair and square. Captain America and the Red Guardian know how to play by the rules, whether they're obeying the government or their own senses of morality. They're not afraid to stand up for what they believe in or lay down their lives if the situation calls for it. At this point, Steve Rogers has tried to sacrifice himself a lot. We've seen him throw himself onto a grenade in Captain America: The First Avenger, and later in the same movie he crashed his plane into the ocean so that it wouldn't detonate near other people. No wonder everyone thought his odds of surviving Avengers Endgame were poor. When Alexei stopped Colonel Ling from taking out Captain America, he did so at his own peril. At this point, he knew he was no match for Steve, but risked his life to save his anyway. When he shoved Ling's hand aside, he fired at gas pipes, triggering an explosion which seemed to cost Alexei his life. These characters have a lot in common, but there have been some even closer replicas of them both. After Alexei was presumed to be gone for the second time, Russian agents created a life model decoy of him. This android was an almost perfect copy of Alexei and matched his strength and abilities. He was used to manipulate Natasha into working against the United States, and when the agents had no further use for her, they attempted to eliminate her. But she fought back and managed to defeat them and the fake Red Guardian. There have also been some faux Captain Americas over the years, including this clone created by Dr. Bong. Dr. Bong. Then there's the Ubermensch, who was made by Dr. Arnim Zola, who's created from DNA from Steve Rogers, Namor, the Human Torch, and Toro. You might think Steve Rogers is one of a kind, but in the wacky world of comic books, that's almost never true. There are so many awesome superpowers out there, and unfortunately for these two, they don't have any of them. Thanks to this training, Alexei is the pinnacle of health and strength. He's a brilliant pilot and strong fighter, but at the end of the day, he's forced to face the limitations of being just human. Steve owes his physical prowess to the super soldier serum, which means he's the absolute peak of human potential in pretty much every area. He's strong, fast, and durable, on par with the most accomplished Olympic gold medalists. He's also a master of hand-to-hand combat and has helped other heroes like Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Hawkeye. But even though he's maxed out all of his stats, he's still limited by the fact that he's just a man. Even though he bested Alexei when the two of them fought, they do have very similar abilities and limitations, especially in a world full of superhumans. Even though the Marvel Universe has tons of great characters with incredible abilities, most fans love the fact that they're also incredibly human. They have hopes, dreams, fears, and personality quirks that many of us can relate to, and that is why we can't help but find them so compelling. Even though they're both super fit humans, Captain America and the Red Guardian still have to deal with the same emotions that the rest of us schlubs do, and that includes falling in love. Of course, Natasha Romanoff was stunned to discover that the husband who supposedly perished in a rocket accident was alive, well, and working as a villain. That's going to be an awkward reunion any way you look at it. But compound on the unpleasantness of the situation, she was also there with Clint Barton, who was her partner at the time. And I'm not just talking about her platonic crime-fighting partner. Yeah, it was awkward for everyone involved. And Steve Rogers definitely knows a thing or two about awkward romantic situations. Even in the MCU, we saw him pining over Peggy Carter after he missed out on his first chance to have a dance with her. Of course, he went back for her during Endgame, but before that, he totally kissed her niece Sharon Carter, who then became his niece through the power of time travel. Yikes. It's hard to say which one of these characters ended up in a more uncomfortable situation. Which aspects of the Red Guardian's character and backstory do you hope are incorporated into the Black Widow movie? Share your hopes and predictions with us in the comments section below, and then click on that subscribe button for more videos from us here at CBR. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.